Hi, everyone. Eric Prince here of Marion West. I'm joined again by Professor Slavoj Žižek, whom we had a very good discussion with just a couple months ago about his previous book. So I'll share his biography again. Slavoj Žižek, a Slovenian philosopher, is international director at the Birkbeck Institute for Humanities, University of London, visiting professor at New York University, a senior researcher at the Department of Philosophy at the University of Ljubljana, Slovenia, the author of numerous books on philosophy, a frequent contributor to various publications and podcasts, and a contributing editor at Compact Magazine. So this interview was prompted by Professor Žižek's latest book, Christian Atheism, How to Be a Real Materialist, which was released with Bloomsbury Publishing, Christian Atheism. So, Professor, to get started, how did you choose to take on this topic at this point in time, and how long were you thinking about writing this particular book?
It's really already my fourth or even fifth book about this topic. Just I think that, you know, this wonderful paradox in a theater, repetitions become before the premiere, no? Like opening, no? So you have repetitions and then you have the first time. So let's say the other books, Fragile Absolute, blah, blah, are repetitions. Here, I think I formulated my stance in a more clear way.
So I recall in your previous book, which we spoke about, as I said, in January, Freedom at Disease Without a Cure, you quote Kierkegaard, and Kierkegaard says of faith, quote, "I do not acquire faith and say Christ after comparing different religions and deciding the best reasons to speak for Christianity. There are reasons to choose Christianity, but these reasons appear only after I've already chosen it, i.e. taken the leap of faith." And in that book, you say something similar about your decision to become a Marxist, which you said makes you later see the reasons for it. How did you become an atheist? Were you always an atheist? What was sort of your engagement with a lack of belief in God?
You can say, yes, without any problem, that I was always an atheist. But for me, and that's the point of this book, being an atheist doesn't mean this for me, this comfortable position, you know, world is there, following its laws, no higher authority, so we do whatever we... Or even in the opposite version, there is complete determinism and so on. No, what I'm looking for is an engaged position to explain what you just mentioned. This is, in a way, the central thesis, what you mentioned of the book. And my paradox is in the book that I bring together here religious belief at its most authentic, Marxism, although I'm very critical of Marx, and even falling in love. Let me begin, I also repeat this point with love. You are never in a position to say, oh, let's say I'm a heterosexual, which I am. Oh, let's look around, I like that girl's hair, I like that girl's legs or whatever, and okay, she, a third one, got most points, so let me fall in love with her. No, paradoxically, when you are in love, you can say, I fell in love for this, that feature, but you see this because you are already in love. For other persons looking at this lady, it's nothing special, these features. And I try to generalize this sense. It's the same with Kierkegaard, and many other top theologists are fully aware of this, that all these games of proof of God, you look at the universe, it seems that there is a deep meaning or intention, tendency towards good in it. This is not how authentic religion works. Authentic religion doesn't need a higher authority so that you look around, my God, you have the best reasons or the most convincing sense, and then, okay, I take you seriously. No, it's the paradox is that, again, to see the reasons, you must already be engaged. And in my other books, so that I don't lose too much time, I make the same point, although I am now very critical of Israel, but generally I am fanatically against anti-Semitism. I don't think we used this a couple of months ago. Namely, my point is, this will make the point clearly. Let's imagine you are a good guy, I'm a bad guy. We are in Germany in 1936-7. We debate about the Jews. I am the bad guy. I give you a series of facts. Do you know that 60%, 70% of bankers are Jewish? Blah, 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 all that. More than 3/4 of art critics are Jewish. They promote, and so on. I give you my own observations, but it's a wrong debate, because the true question is not where the Nazis right in how they characterize the Jews as greedy, corrupted, and so on. The true problem is, why did the Nazis, in order to function, to assert their identity, need the figure of a Jew? So to fight anti-Semitism, again, it's not enough to just look at things objectively. You must ask, how do you stand towards it? In other words, the only authentic rejection of anti-Semitism should be speaking from an already engaged position of perceiving it as the horror that it is. The moment you try to balance and say, wait a minute, but maybe some Jews did some evil things and so on, you are lost. Of course, this is true about anybody, you know. We know this neo-Nazi argumentation. Well, they say, and they're in some sense right. Okay, Nazi crimes, but look, when the Allies bombed Dresden and Hamburg, it was a terrible bombing, trying to kill as many civilians as possible. I say, yes, but basically the Allies were right and the Nazis were wrong. This doesn't come second. We are already in a certain world where, I'll put it like this, and this is important to say, especially today, when expert knowledge is so highly appreciated. Every expert knowledge is already based on some political choice. There is no, I think, neutral expert knowledge, where you say, they like to say today, I don't care if you characterize me as conservative, liberal, and so on, these are facts. No, facts are only facts within certain engagement. And the most dangerous engagement is the engagement which perceives itself as neutral, but it's not really neutral. So in this sense, I am an atheist, but I think that's the paradox of the book, that Christianity already is a religion of atheism. If I may quickly repeat this old mantra, so that then we go on to other things. What is the basic idea of Christianity? God becomes man, is crucified. Okay, it happened in almost all religions. God sends a Messiah. Messiah is misunderstood, is killed. But in Christianity, it's not simply that then, I don't know, the son returns to his father and then we wait for next Messiah. No, what follows the crucifixion is Holy Ghost, which is something quite unique. It's a community, egalitarian community of followers, which violates all these hierarchical rules and so on. They are really in an authentic sense, not in a standard communist sense. They are comrades. It's equality. You know which passage I prefer from the Bible? When Christ is with his apostles in a tent and somebody steps in and says, tells him, listen, your mother, whatever, brother, are waiting outside for you, your family. And Christ said, this is my family here. This doesn't mean he didn't love his mother and so on. it means that they don't count as part of social hierarchy, mother, father. They, you know, that's the point of that big line when St. Paul says, there are for me no men or women, no Jews or Greeks. We are all one in Christ. It's a unique idea, which means it shouldn't be misunderstood as, yes, we are united waiting for Christ to come. It says in the gospel, my God, when before Christ was crucified, when some apostle, I don't know which one, asked Christ, how we will know that you will return after your death? Christ simply says, when there be love between two of you, I am there. I will be there. So it's not Holy Ghost, it's not a community waiting from something to happen. It is already here. The community is it. I think it's wrong, this reading of community to wait for the end of the world or whatever. No, in this sense, with the death of God, the end of the world happened, which means we cannot rely on some higher power. You know, this primitive idea, let me just finish this line to make it clear. This primitive idea, no matter how wrong things are on our earth, there is some higher authority which will take care of it. We can be sure that what appears to us as evil serves a higher purpose. I don't know if I mentioned this in my last book, but in others, I often play with it. I think the most horrible metaphor for false religion is the one often found with traditional theologists, where they say what appears evil to you is comparable to looking from too close at a painting, great painting. Name one, I don't know which one. I don't want to be vulgar and mention Mona Lisa, whatever. If you look very close at it, it's nothing, it's just a stain. But from a proper distance, it has meaning. That stain contributes to the totality of the all. But I think such an approach is terrifyingly anti-Christian. Are you really ready to say, let me just enumerate some horrors, colonialism, Gulag, Holocaust, and so on, that they just appear evil to us because we don't have a proper distance, that in a total view of things, they serve a higher good purpose. Tragically, even some Jews buy this. They claim it's quite popular among some radical Zionists. They claim that, it sounds crazy, that Hitler was an instrument of God. Holocaust served to remind the Jews that their place is not Europe, which corrupt them, but they have to return to their land. But this, I think, is totally wrong. I think that precisely when we are in a horrible situation, when there is something horrible happens, and when you cannot justify it by some higher purpose, Christ is with you at that point. So again, Christianity, for me, violently rejects this idea. Don't look too close at things, look at the total view. No, the point of Christianity is, I don't care for the higher purpose. Look at this concrete horror, what is happening there. In this sense, Christianity also opposes, almost I would say, the fake religious nature of Stalinism. You know how Stalinism was justified by some people? Yeah, millions died, but wait a minute. If the outcome of this will be some future harmonious, rich communist society, it will be justified. No, the point of Christianity is, no, we cannot do this obscene operation of retroactively justifying suffering. When we are caught between the big history, you know, this view of even if millions die, do you see the progress, and concrete people suffering? Christianity is on the side of the concrete people, singular people suffering, with no fake optimism.
So I think you've kind of largely answered my next question already, especially with your point about the Holy Ghost. But I think I'll ask it anyway. And obviously, in the book, you discuss.
I like interview. Sorry to interrupt you. That would be my ideal interview. That you let me talk, and then at the end you ask me the question to which I already answered.
Yeah, I think maybe just kind of put into sharp relief, because you also discuss, as you know, Buddhism at length in the book.
That's very problematic. If you want, I can explain it. I know I got myself in a lot of trouble with this, and I have a high respect for Buddhism, less for Hinduism, but Buddhism. For me, there are ultimately only two mega. If we go to the end, how do you say in English, at a gunpoint, you know, like cut the crap what we have. We have
gun to your head
Buddhist
or something like that.
ethics and Christian ethics, I think. Buddhist ethics is great, but it's for me nonetheless an ethics of distance. The idea is ultimately disconnect with the world, accept that reality out there is a game of shadows, of appearances, and in this sense, you can survive. You are not caught into suffering of reality and so on and so on. My problem here is that, okay, that's the great side of it, but that I studied a lot of Buddhism, how from the very beginning, immediately after Buddha's death, they got a problem. A king already at that point, when was it, 5th century BC or whatever, the king who accepted Buddhism was engaged because his country was attacked in a war. So how do you combine this with no living being should be killed and so on and so on? And then the answer is, the predominant answer, just do it at a distance. Remember, reality is a spectacle of empty phenomena and so on and so on. And this stands served regularly in history as the most refined justification of military action. For example, a book that I quote often, a guy called Brian Victoria wrote it, who is himself a Buddhist monk, called Zen at War. It's a very depressing book where he shows how in the 1930s and 40s, they are a minority in Japan. There were around 10 million of Zen Buddhists. They, apart from 3-4 dissidents, they threw all their support behind Japanese militarism, justifying it in different ways. I will not lose time. So again, this would be my ultimate ethical decision. Both are mega great decisions. Either Buddhism or you risk full engagement. Your lesson is not. Reality is a fake, but even if it's a fake, I am fully in it. It's the place where I have to fight and so on and so on.
So circling back to Christianity a little bit, after you approvingly quote Adrian Johnston, you write, quote, "Atheism cannot stand on its own. A detour through religion is necessary. Not only religion as such, but specifically Christianity is indispensable," end quote. Can you sort of just clarify for people who haven't read your book yet, why Christianity in particular?
Because I think that without going through Christianity, your atheism will remain this atheism at a distance, which will retain what is worth in religious legacy. What I already described, this notion of there is history there, I know it's logic, I'm just a tiny little part of it, let's rely on some higher authority and so on and so on. In this sense, as I just mentioned, Stalin was in some sense a deep believer. He all the time evoked historical progress, a higher law of necessity, and so on. That's typical. Stalin doesn't present himself, although he was, as a despot. He presents himself as the servant of the people. I know better than people themselves what they really want. I'm just acting on their behalf. This is to be avoided. So again, for me, you have to go through that unique Christian experience, best exemplified, of course, by the famous lines of Christ on the cross, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, Father, why have you abandoned me? Which is, as my preferred theologist, Gilbert Keith Chesterton, put it, a moment when God himself no longer believes in God. He says, in all other religions, you have people who become atheists. Only in Christianity, God himself goes through this experience. And for him, as for Hegel, who is my philosophical reference, this experience is not just our human experience, it's in some sense the death of God himself, itself, however you put it. It means there is no, what in Lacanian theory, psychoanalytic theory which I follow, we call the big other, the larger symbolic network, which even if our singular life is full of catastrophes, which somehow guarantees or provides deep meaning to it. Because that's, for me, ideology at its most elementary. Ideology is, you suffer, you are, sorry for the expression, in deep shit, but then a guy comes and tells you, no, but there is a deeper meaning in what is happening to you. And then this meaning can be whatever. You are really guilty, you just don't know it, God is tempting you, and so on. That's why, so that you will not just accuse me that I only refer to Christianity. That's why, for me, when people ask me, which is the first big book, text on the critique of ideology, for me, it's the book of Job.
Mm-hmm.
You remember when everything goes bad for Job, and then three friends come to him who are pure ideologists. Each of them gives the version of why his suffering has a deeper meaning. You know, like maybe you did something wrong, look deeper into you, and so on. And then comes the miracle. Jehovah comes and says to Job, you are right in your complaining. Those three of your pseudo friends are wrong. It's a magical moment. I think, maybe I'm wrong, I think that this happens only in Christianity. So this is what, can I give you, I don't use it in the book, sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, I talk too much, please cut me.
No, give your example, and then I want to ask you about the film The Rapture, but give your example first.
No, I wanted to just tell you a structure which I obsessively describe in my book of how, even in my first book known in the West, The Sublime Object of Ideology, of how to use this complex term, truth emerges through misrecognition. You cannot approach directly the truth. You can approach the truth only if you accept a false version, and then this false version disintegrates. You know, Wiki, many of my friends or people who listen today must know it. 30 years ago, I used this a lot. A wonderful joke from old Soviet Union, where a Jew, Rabinovich, he was a legendary figure in Soviet jokes, comes to the emigration office and says, I would like to emigrate, to leave the Soviet Union. They ask him why. He says, for two reasons. The first reason is that the Soviet Union will disintegrate, communism will fall apart, and then the new people will blame us Jews for all the crimes of communism. The bureaucrat says, but this is wrong. Communism will stay forever here. And of course, Rabinovich says, this is my second reason. You know, this logic that you cannot, that's the intelligence. You cannot say directly, I am tired of communism, I don't see any change here, although it's interesting that this joke was wrong. When I learned it in the mid-80s, communism effectively was disintegrating. So let me give you even a shorter story, and I hope people will see the logic. Hegel, in his maybe most important book, Phenomenology of Spirit, has this characterization. He says the spirit is a bone. He refers to phrenology, this most primitive materialism, which claims that if you study the structure of your skull, bones here, you can discover what your psyche really is, which tendencies are in it, and so on. Hegel says there is a speculative truth in this statement. Why? Hegel's problem is what is spirit. When you say spirit is a bone, what is your reaction? An utter bewilderment and contradiction. My God, no, spirit is not a bone. A bone is an inert object. Spirit is precisely the ambiguity, dynamic of spiritual life. So you experience immediately an incredible inconsistency, contradiction. It can be like that. This is spirit. Spirit is this contradiction. You see, you cannot, if you state it directly, you cannot get it. That's why, just to give an indication to those who, even if they don't believe me, want to follow this path, that's why, for me, you know what's the real beginning of authentic Christianity? It's really a new beginning. In late modernity, so-called Rhine like the German river, Rhine, Rhenian mystics, Meister Eckhart, and then later Jacob Böhme, and so on, they were incredible. They already said that, yes, God is the creator of man, but only through man, God becomes man. Without man, God, some of them even speculate God is evil, irresponsible. They have this horrible vision of a dark side of God himself. So this is, again, I think, something unique in Christianity. I think that European modernity doesn't begin with Renaissance or Descartes or I don't know what. It begins with this new trend in mysticism where, let me put it in slightly speculative terms, it's not just we are here, torn, imperfect, God is out there, perfect, above us. No. What torments us, the division in us, is already a division in God himself. God himself is already torn apart, suffering, and so on. That's absolutely unique. And to just to answer what you begin with very shortly, you asked me why today? Because today, with the tendencies that we have, we need this authentic Christian approach more than ever. What remains otherwise? What is our common ideology? On the one hand, it's this expert knowledge, you know, don't care about metaphysical questions, just do your job properly. Then we have something which is very sad. I think the future is on the side of Japan and South Korea, spreading into China, which is, I read, it depresses me seriously. I read that more and more young people there, it's not that they are dissident or critical or what. They simply renounce any great engagement. Millions there have this attitude. I don't have a perfect life. but it's not so bad. So forget about big history, communism, freedom, China, religious fundamentalism. Focus on small enjoyment, which movies you like, which music, which food. Organize your little life. This, I think, is a pretty sad tendency. In contrast to this, you have new forms of religious fundamentalism, which are in some sense horrifying. For example, I read in the news, and I think if there is something that deeply betrays the Jewish spirit, it's this. Did you read that now some fundamentalists in Israel prepare effectively, it's not just a vague idea, to destroy that Al-Aqsa mosque and build the third temple there? And they do it in the proper way, which means, you know, you have somewhere in Talmud or Bible, I don't know, that to do this, you have to sacrifice some red cows whose skin is red and so on. So for 10 years, decades in Texas, did you know this? It's not a joke. They breed these cows. They already transported them to Israel. And you know what is most perverted? That here you have a unity of Zionist Jews and of anti-Semitic Christian fundamentalists, because they relate to the New Testament, in which it says that when the temple, the third time, the temple will be rebuilt, there will be Armageddon, and then all who are not Christians will be killed and so on. So it's totally inconsistent, but isn't this sad? How? What we usually, and it's not that, you know, what anti-Semites usually say. Some of my best friends are Jews. No, practically all my friends are Jews. But here I've got a problem. I mean, isn't it sad that if I were to tell you this story, not mentioning the religion, you would have said this must be some fanatical Christian or a Muslim fundamentalist. No, even the Jews are falling into this. We live in a very dangerous and sad time. I talk too much. Go on.
Well, I wanted to ask you about a film, and we talked about it a little bit last time, that you brought up both in Freedom and Disease Without a Cure and this book, which is the 19...
Again, I return to it.
Yeah, you must be very interested.
My 5 best Hollywood movies, yes.
Yeah, The Rapture. And as you discuss in the book here, it has sort of an unexpected, almost anti-theist ending. So maybe for people who haven't seen the film yet, you could just explain why this film speaks so much to you and how it intersects with...
Okay, it's a complex story. I will just make it as short as possible. Mimi Rogers plays, a woman who, because of her private traumas, becomes a deep believer and goes into California desert with his daughter after her husband dies to wait to be raptured. It doesn't happen, so she kills her daughter. Blah, blah, blah. So at the end, when she's arrested for this, a real rapture and the end of the world happen. So she finds herself alone, walks to a certain edge, and it's the edge of heaven, where earth touches heaven, and then she sees there her husband dead in paradise, and her daughter telling her, "Mommy, just say, I love you, Jesus, and you will join us." And that's the shock of the movie, the last scene. She said, no. And the daughter asked him, "Mommy, do you know what this means?" She says, yes, it means I will stay here forever. I think Christ is on her side. I think that the 2 members dead of her family are the true temptation to betrayal. I think that precisely, this is, you remember what I was telling before, that Christianity is not forget your small suffering, there is a greater cost. No, she is not ready to forgive and forget. And even talk about this. I don't like the stupid formula, which is fashionable, of yes, I will forgive you, but I will never forget it. I think the correct answer is almost the opposite one. Maybe I will forget it, but I will never forgive you. You know who uses this? My friends in South Korea. They told me older generations are still so traumatized by what the Japanese were doing during World War II. You know that they kidnapped tens of thousands of young, beautiful girls, women there, using them as prostitutes, forced prostitutes for Japanese soldiers. And even now, it's to add insult to injury. Now, Japan doesn't want clearly to apologize. They say, no, they were voluntary prostitutes. And no, South Koreans are telling me, we try to forget it. It's too horrible to remember, but we will not forgive it.
So one of the things one notices, or at least I noticed, and this maybe is a little bit more of a fun question, so to speak, is is the interesting sort of sources or people you quote. Obviously, you quote Steve Pinker, living academics. We talk about Freud, Jacques Lacan, a number of people. But then there's also references, as I said, to Mimi Rogers, to Game of Thrones, to the film, the TV series Ted Lasso. To what degree do you watch American popular culture? How much of that are you consuming with some of the...
Here I may surprise some of my leftist friends, you know. I am not ready to simply dismiss Hollywood as a fake. You know, all those fashionable books, Hollywood, the ultimate of culture industry, of cultural industry, commodification, and so on and so on. Yes, but at the same time, this is the mystery of Hollywood. You get things which are in some sense incredible, breathtaking, critical, and so on. My favorite example would be those screwball comedies, Cary Grant and so on, from late 30s and 40s. They may appear that stupid comedies, but they are the most feminist thing. Usually in them, it's always the woman who wins, the woman who is the aggressive one, and so on. They have a very strong, you find there a very strong gesture of fighting social injustice for women's rights, and so on and so on. So again, don't get rid of Hollywood too quickly. To give you I don't yet quote it in that book, back to the Game of Thrones, you know. I found the ending, the finale of the series, shocking. No wonder many idiots were disappointed by it. But I found it almost tragic. How was she called? The lady, she is killed. And then what happens? The old corrupted regime is reinstalled. It's a very pessimist view of how you get rid of the authentic revolutionary Daenerys, or how she called her. She's killed, and then the old corruption returns. It's a very pessimist view. I found that series politically very appropriate. And even where I don't agree with authors, directors, their work, I find it interesting how they tackle complex questions. Like maybe I mentioned it the last time, the last of Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, where you have Batman controlling a woman and her partner who are kind of strong revolutionaries even, and you have some kind of dictatorship on Manhattan. It's wrong politically, but it approaches the right questions. I'm much more interested in movies like this, which for me miss the right solution, but deal with the right topic, than with this benevolent Hollywood stuff and so on, whatever. So I think that, okay, let me repeat, I didn't yet use it, at least with you. I will repeat my new version of an old joke. I don't use it in the book. Yet, you know why? Because it's very fashionable. Now, I will again shock my leftist followers. It's very fashionable to say in these days how, oh, the American era is over. We are entering a new multi-centric world. Well, I'm not glad about it. You know what? Arundhati Roy, a very good leftist Indian writer, she says the tragedy of the ongoing Gaza war is that what? Till now, the European American notion of human rights, we know it was hypocritical. The West itself didn't follow it. But it nonetheless gave us a certain minimal moral compass. You could have also used it even against the West. Like, you are preaching these human rights, but you don't follow them yourself. But it gave a certain orientation. And I don't think there is another version awaiting. Like, some people hope if there will be a total fiasco of this Western discourse of human rights, or something more balanced, less colonialist will replace it. No, we are, I think, entering a new multi-centric world where simply military power, brutal exploitation, and so on will dominate. And instead of some unifying ideology, we will simply get new strong nation states. So this is what horrifies me today. And now back to my joke. This is why I think that Trump is really dangerous. You know, probably I used it when we spoke the last time. My big point about Trump, you know that neoconservatives like to emphasize how we are fundamentally Christian, against postmodernism, historicism, relativity. But in the way he acts, Donald Trump is absolutely postmodern, ironic, relativist president. He is obscene, he makes dirty jokes, he is inconsistent. And for me, if you are looking for authentic decency, moral majority, it's Bernie Sanders. So what I want to say is that now I come to my joke. It's a paraphrase of an old East German joke. The idea is this one. Let's imagine that the three of today's most influential politicians meet God and are allowed to ask him one question. Putin, Xi, the Chinese boss, and Donald Trump. First, Putin asks God, tell me, how will it be with my beloved Russia after I win the war in Ukraine and so on? God says, it's not so good. You are now economically weakened, and in 10, 20 years, Russia will be a Chinese colony. Putin turns around and starts to cry. Then Xi approaches God and says, okay, we will have half of Russia. How will then be in the next decades with my China? God says, also not so good. Your economy is now in deep trouble. And you not only you will have to reinforce your power, more old communist dictatorship, but you will even have to rely on Taiwan, asking Taiwan to help. She turns around, starts to cry. Then Donald Trump says, dear God, what will become out of United States when I will be re-elected president? You can guess the answer. God turns around and starts to cry. And God was right, because if this happens to China or Russia, it just happens to a country. But in spite of all hypocrisy, imperialism, and so on, there was something authentically mobilizing in the ideas of freedom, democracy, human values promoted by United States and Western Europe. Yes, we should criticize these countries, but we should never forget that the very apparatus that we use is part of this Western legacy. I'm sorry, but Marx, Freud, name them. They are all deeply embedded in Western tradition. If this tradition will disintegrate, I'm afraid of the world we are entering now.
You talk a little bit about the extent of Muslim immigration to Europe and refugee resettlement in the book. You write, quote, "It is if the more you tolerate Islam, the stronger its pressure on you will be," end quote. In light of what you just said about sort of the Western tradition, how do you see the degree of the presence of Islam on the European continent? As you may have seen, Richard Dawkins commented on that in the past few days as well.
No, here again, I will maybe lose some of my leftist friends, because of course I am against Islamophobia and so on. But nonetheless, I see two problems. First, you know, those liberals who are against against Islamophobia preach the respect of different ways of life. But sorry, there is, with this regard, a serious conflict. I'm not saying Muslims are bad or whatever, but Islam as a religion, and I read, you will be shocked if I tell you whom I read, Khomeini, 40 years ago, who says clearly, Christianity is too much a private religion. You know, like, you can be Christian, blah, blah, but like in the Western democratic states, Christianity shouldn't be directly used as a state religion, at least it shouldn't be. While Khomeini is clear, he said Islam is political or it's not Islam at all. For them, Islam is not, in our European sense, a private religion, but it's directly constituted of the political community. And of course, this then forces you to approach in a new way the problems of tolerance and so on and so on. I mean, for me, you know, like when we speak about tolerance, we always focus too much on these ridiculous topics. Like when I say, I love Roma, the old racist term was gypsies, you know. Yeah, but then you ask people, why do you like them? Oh, their food, their music, and so on. But no, I'm sorry. Roma have a very specific way of life, and it's crucial for their reproduction that you get pre-arranged marriages. If you take this from them, they disintegrate in 2-3 generations. So what will you do here? You know, we get into serious conflict here. Okay, we tolerate Islam, but again, what happens when they treat a woman in a way which is unacceptable to us? Where does the respect for different ways of life end? Now, I give them the same right to criticize us. All I'm now claiming is that this problem of the popular term was clash of civilizations, is a real problem. It's not, as some primitive Marxists are saying, oh, this is a pseudo problem invented by the imperialists to cover up economic exploitation and so on and so on. No, it's a real problem. Second thing, I follow closely problems with immigration and so on. And of course, for ethical reasons, but even for economic reasons, Europe simply cannot afford to throw them out. It's interesting to follow, as I do since it's a nearby country, in Italy, Giorgia Meloni, very right-wing, almost a neo-fascist, was elected on the platform of get rid of the immigrants and so on. Now, not because of democratic pressure, but for purely economic reasons, she had to, in a large extent, change her stance. Why? She discovered that Italian economy is already so much depending on the labor of immigrants, that if they leave, it's a collapse. Because there is in Italy, in Germany, in United Kingdom, even in my shithole of a country, Slovenia, jobs are getting racialized in sense of race, not ratio, reason. In the sense that there are low-paid physical jobs, not just primitive, constructing the buildings, heavy, primitive in the sense of physically heavy work, but also services in hospitals, homes for the old, and so on, where our people are, to put it in primitive terms, too spoiled. You need immigrants. Like the Germans admitted this, that they will need even more immigrants. If immigrants leave the country or if they are thrown out, German economy collapses. It's the same in England and so on. So that's one fact. On the other hand, I think the danger I see is that new right-wing populists are winning one country after the other. Sweden, Denmark, okay, they are not right-wing populists there, but this idea that immigrants are a danger. So what if we have racist right-wingers who will be democratically elected? It might well happen in Europe that the choice will be that if we want to remain open, anti-racist, respectful toward immigrants, we will have to curb democracy. Now I will give you my, I don't yet use it in the book, my really sad conclusion. You know, everybody knows, okay, in United States, that old saying by, attributed to Lincoln, but it wasn't really him. He just repeated, you know, you can cheat, deceive some people all the time, all people sometime, but you cannot deceive all the people all the time. I think you can. I think you can. I think that it's not that I'm not talking this as an intellectual. We are no wiser than the majority, but that generally, maybe even especially intellectuals today, we try to avoid the truth. Truth is not popular. Truth hurts. There is no kind of a spontaneous tendency toward truth. No, if anything, our whole daily life is structured in a way to avoid as much as possible what goes on, even if you know what goes on. Let me give you an example. You remember Abu Ghraib, those horrors which were brought out. You know how many of my friends, liberal friends, when I was privately with them, reacted to it? They told me, okay, of course, the state is doing such things, but why did it have to come out in public? Their ideal was the state should do this discreetly. We know it has to be done, you torture prisoners, but we want to pretend that we don't know it. You know, that's the majority, I claim. It's very sad, pessimist view. What this means is that I no longer believe that there is a social group, let it be, I don't know, for Marx, it was the working class. For Mao Zedong, it was farmers, poor farmers. For the 68 rebelling students, it was the students. For some people today, it's immigrants. That there is a privileged social group which somehow embodies the truth. Like you can say all others are lying, but they see authentically the life the way it is. I think that there is no privileged emancipatory subject today. Now, some of my leftist friends will say yes, because in the West, the working class is corrupted. They're already part of the colonialist system. But what about struggle against colonialism? I think we should be ruthless there. Of course, I support it, but let's be honest and face its deadlocks. For example, probably you heard this story. I repeat it all the time. Half a year ago, at a round table at Birkbeck College in London, we had a big debate about South Africa. And I asked an old lady, black from South Africa, an old African National Congress politician, old revolutionary. I asked her, is it true that South Africa is a failed state? Like, how are things really there? What should I tell to right-wingers who tell me, but look, it's a failed state? She told me it's even worse. The strongest tendency now among the poor black majority is nostalgia for apartheid. Because the standard of living, if anything, was slightly higher than now, but because South Africa was a police state, it was safety, order, and so on. So you see, we shouldn't escape from these traumatic topics. It's urgently that we confront all this.
Last question, Professor Žižek, since you have, we've talked about Ukraine before, you commented on it in the book. In the past couple of days, the United States Congress has passed its pretty expansive foreign aid package, much of which is going to Ukraine to close. How do you see that effort, and how do you see the situation now in the war between Russia and Ukraine?
I like it very much that you used openly this expression, the war between Russia and Ukraine, because again, I will be losing supporters, but let me clarify some things. I experience sometimes myself as an idiot because I defend and support Ukraine, but as a leftist, you know, I just don't get it. How can anyone see Putin as a potential ally of the third world, the neo-communist even, no? So let me go through points. What brought me into big trouble was when I gave, is it already a month ago or more, when I had an interview with Piers Morgan, I said, the West should risk and give Ukraine nuclear weapons. And I was attacked. Am I crazy? Do I want world war? Of course, I didn't mean it seriously, but I mean it as a very reasonable provocation. Because we all the time, our media, I think Russian influence is here very strong. Did you notice this? How there is always some time of suspicion of Ukrainians. Are they nonetheless too crazy, too violent? Why don't they try to make peace and so on? And like if we give them nuclear arms, they will explode. But sorry, Russia already gave nuclear arms to Belarus. It was officially announced. So where were those who protest this at that point? Next point, militarism. They claim we need negotiation. Yeah, but without Western help, Ukraine would not be in a position to negotiate even. It would simply have to surrender. So the only thing that bothers me with this support is that support for Israel was automatically assumed. Support for Ukraine was uncertain. Now, I think that to bring peace into the Middle East, we should, to put it very simply, that's my opinion, condition the support to Israel, set conditions. Because did you notice, this is what makes me very sad. Till now, Israeli politics has two axioms. First, in Gaza, we are fighting Hamas, not Palestinians. Palestinians themselves are even terrorized by Hamas. And second point, critique of state, Israel as a state is okay, just not anti-Semitism. Now, if you read Israeli media, these two differences collapse. Now, on the one hand, Netanyahu said explicitly, today, because open anti-Semitism is not fashionable, we have critique of Israel, and any critique of Israel really serves anti-Semitism. And the other difference is also falling apart now. Palestinians are accused more and more of openly, all of them supporting Hamas and so on and so on. So what I'm saying is that in this situation, precisely to give Israel, and especially the Jews there, some perspective, Israel should be put under pressure. Now you will say, who am I to say this? I don't know, I mentioned this the last time when we talked, but you know whom I trust most now? You will laugh, in Israel. Ex-bosses of their spy agencies, Shin Bet, Mossad. They are incredible. Ami Ayalon, I think, the ex-boss of Shin Bet, said in a recent interview, we must give Palestinians some kind of political subjectivity, two-state. He even made a concrete proposal. He said, leave out of freedom Marwan Barghouti, the leader of Intifada, who nonetheless opposes violent attacks on the Jews. He says we can make a deal with him. They are the rational people. If you say something like this today in Germany, you lose your job. Where are we when what the ex-boss of Shin Bet is saying brings you in trouble? I worry. The big problem is the following one, that, you know, we have now in most Western states, you in the United States also, you have all these pro-Palestinian demonstrations and so on and so on. If there will be a pressure to prohibit them, I'm terribly afraid that it will explode into open anti-Semitism. This is my fear. I also sympathize with Palestinians, but my fear is that beneath the surface, anti-Semitism is effectively breaking out. So my point would have been not abandon Israel, blah, 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 but be more aggressive. Europe and United States should simply set conditions. What do I mean by this? Isn't this so? United States, I think, in the Middle East should act more as a superpower, I would almost say. Did you see, you know, there are two photos, with this I will conclude if I may. There are two photos which are, for me, already now in April, I can say this, the photos of the year. One is, I don't know even who shot it, a simple photo from Gaza recently. You see close to you bombs, American bombs given to Israel, dropped on buildings which are exploding. And in the background of the same image, you see American parachutes dropping food parcels. That's the madness of it. Don't you think that United States should act there more as the superpower? To say Israel, sorry, F off, we take it over. We send our Marines there, you go out, and we establish some kind of order, and so on and so on. It's horrible how Biden allows himself to be terrorized, mocked at by the Israeli government, and I think the Jews will pay the price ultimately for it. So my point is that I have more doubts there than with regard to Ukraine. I am here, and I repeat it endlessly, as a leftist, I'm afraid of what goes on in Ukraine. Russians are slowly progressing. The Ukrainians are getting tired. They are losing, which is understandable, the will to fight. Do you know that already now, of the people who are in the best age for fighting, from 20s till 40s, 600,000 young men have emigrated, not only women and children, men. So I think maybe a compromise is needed. But the problem is that we shouldn't allow for this compromise to be a simple victory for Russia. It's vital to do this. So I am for even with all the danger and so on, even stronger engagement of the West, not because I'm a Cold War fanatic, but because I think that stronger engagement of the West is the only way to really bring peace there. It's a crazy position. I am getting threats now from the Russian media here.
Really?
That I am an agent of CIA, paid by CIA, and we live in crazy times where irony is no longer allowed. Because if this were 20 years earlier, you know what would have been my answer? To publish an open letter of CIA. You see, I'm doing your job. Do you need my bank account? Where is the money from you? And so on. Today, you cannot do it. I don't belong to this world any longer. But you see my point. This is crucial. As a leftist, I am for Ukraine because I don't see any meaningful way in which Putin can be called a leftist. My God, do you know how can the same people who are here, pro-LGBT and so on, show understanding for Russia? Don't they know that now even LGBT is proclaimed terrorist in Russia officially? Why don't we bring this out more openly? I really think that although we always hear how Russia is excommunicated and so on, no, especially in the so-called Third War, they are winning.
Professor Žižek, thanks so much for speaking with me. Really glad we got to do it again. And once again, the book is Christian Atheism, How to Be a Real Materialist. So thank you so much, Professor. Enjoyed it a lot.
I appreciate that you were kind enough to invite me again. And I hope it's not the last time. It's always a pleasure for me because I perceive you as one of the few normal people who is not a crazy neoconservative, but also not this fake cancel culture, pseudo-leftist or whatever, you know. Don't you think that today some kind of a common decency, common sense is what a left should, just to conclude, should shamelessly accept? We talked about this, I think, the last time, how, sorry to tell you this, but January 6th, 3 years ago, no? This was, for me, the moment when new populist right stole even the idea of revolution from the left.
If we had had more time, I had a question about that.
Okay, but
yeah, so you talk about it in your book, of course, toward the end.
Yeah. I talk about everything in the book. Now, just to announce, I'm now writing a next book where I'm trying to escape from this miserable reality, and I go, don't be shocked, into philosophical consequences of quantum mechanics. It's a beautiful world out of this shithole that we call reality here.
When will that be released?
Now I'm more careful. I write too quickly, too much. I took a little bit more effort into this book, but still you can see traces of heterogeneity. I want to write a real book, one clear line, and I don't care about popularity, what really obsesses me. Thanks very much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good rest of the day.
If you want to hear from me again, sorry, I will do it in my way. Sure. I will kill your mother if you call me again, Professor. Let's call it a name, colleague, friend. Just don't call me Professor. Okay.
Okay. Slavoj, thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.